Hey yo, my name's Haki, and I'm making a rogue light deck building action game where you play as a celestial demigod born to put an end to the further corruption of the worlds by your prodigal siblings, using an arsenal of different spells, minions, and weapons to achieve your goals. Now that's kind of a huge word salad, but what does all that even mean? Well, I've taken lots of inspiration from a host of games, namely Devil May Cry, Phantom Dust, Lost Kingdoms, and of course Magic the Gathering, and kind of put it all into a blender. You will begin the game in a hub world where you can manage your deck, which I know is not very DMC. I know, but trust me, it is the pivotal mechanic of my game. Your deck represents all the weapons, spells, and minions that you can use at your disposal to augment your abilities during any given run. You're hunting a boss through these zones, one of your corrupted siblings, but your link to the magical ether is weak here. If you die without saving your new cards back in the hub world, you start over with what you're able to keep from the previous runs. So that's the premise, but how do you play? Well, right now you can do all the character action things. You have health and magic, called ether in this game, as your basic resources. And you can walk, run, jump, attack, complete with regular and special variants of attacks, and use magical spells. I've also put in some air movement, namely a double jump and an air step move that I need to kind of reanimate for some air mobility. And then there's the cards. I've programmed it so that you can open a menu to view your hand by holding the tab button. From there, yeah, you can just click a card to use it. Using a card takes a bit of ether to use, but each type obviously has different effects for the player. Weapon cards equip the player with a new weapon, which changes their moveset and makes their melee attacks stronger. I've honestly worked the most on this system, and I have a great base with which I can use to expand with more weapon types down the line. Right now, outside of basic attacks without a weapon, where I kind of envision the player throwing charge cards like Gambit from the X-Men, I've made a sword weapon set. The set only has one weapon for now, but I can easily add more weapons later. And that was the idea, to make a system with which I can easily add more weapon types and weapons within those types for the player to use. Also, I mean, come on, it's swords. That's like the classic video game weapon. So what better to prototype this system with than the hero's ever faithful weapon, the sword? Spells will load up a new spell to use up to, well, I haven't really decided that yet. It's 6 right now, and you can switch between your loaded spells like switching guns in a first person shooter. This will be the basis of my range combat and maybe a few other things, but this system is in desperate need of a rewrite. When I test it myself, it feels pretty shallow in comparison to the melee gameplay. I want it to be as action focused as the melee gameplay, so I'll go more in depth on this at a later date after I've finished redesigning things. And then finally are the minions, which I haven't completely implemented yet, but if you played a game of good old Magic the Gathering, then you have an idea of what I'm going for. Now, that's a lot of talk about what I plan to do, but you're probably wondering what I've already done. Well, I wanted to get movement, melee, and range combat feeling decent. Maybe not perfect, but working in the case of range combat, and feeling right in the case of melee, although there's still tons left to do for both. Players can also, of course, use weapon and spell cards to change their moveset. I've also started on a base non-player character class for any NPC entity that carries generic logic. You as the player can attack this entity, and it technically attacks back, sure, but it doesn't really try to survive against the player yet. It's still a good base to use to expand for other NPCs. Now, I can't tell y'all how long that took. In order to prototype the concept, I have to do a lot of stupid things instead of make the damn game. I decided early on that I needed to validate the concept with systems to support character customization with different animations. So I would need a modular character and, well, different animations. I started developing my own workflows for creating the player character so that there'd be a good foundation with which to make different clothing and armor sets and weapon move sets, that kind of stuff. This took months of trial and error, but I'm finally at a place where my animation workflow is syncing up beautifully with everything else in my general game dev workflow. I'm able to make new animations and get them in engine now fairly quickly, and I'm moving with a lot more confidence in regards to my player character at least. For melee combat specifically, I'm finally at a point where I can easily add more content to this pillar of the game, and that's given me a really proud feeling and the courage to see this project through. Still, I feel like a lot of this was kind of a mistake. Don't get me wrong, I've made a ton of progress, but some systems like character customization, I'm not even using yet. I'm prototyping a lot of the base gameplay, and I'm purposely not trying to work on polishing graphics yet, so the project was going to look like a hot mess no matter what. But I still think it was kind of a mistake to work on things that didn't have to do with combat, since that was my first milestone. But what can you do? You live and you learn. Alright. So you're probably asking what's next. Well, I'm working on entity AI systems like pathfinding and group logic. My idea is that every entity in my game inherits from the character class, and it's that class that manages the controllers needed for it to run its logic. At its most stripped down form, the basic character class will rely only on a few base systems to work. For example, a simple bird in my game could use the base character class and be fully functional right out the gate. So then, maybe we create a new class that derives from the character class named Ghoul, and it's just this generic enemy NPC. It maintains the functionality of the character class, so it can move around, but it'll have more features with which to guide its woefully simple logic. Now, imagine another class inheriting from the character class being, say, wolves, that would have the functionality for group logic with a leader that the group follows. Hey, while we're at it, let's also have a traveling NPC of type merchant in the area that, while deriving from character, has extended interactivity functionality, someone the player can actually talk to and trade with. Honestly, for group logic, it should be as simple as creating a controller class on the leader that hosts a list of that same class, and then having another controller class on the followers that has access to the leader's list. This is getting a little bit technical and kind of too wishy-washy for a Devlog 0, so I'll just end it there. I don't know. I gotta honestly play around with it a little bit more, but I'll figure it out. I also want to make the aggressive entities more, aggressive in order to make things in the world that would be more fun to fight for the player. You can probably tell, but getting this working will not just make enemy characters more dynamic, but it will also open the door to make my first actual implementation of a minion card for players to use. I'll show that off in the first real development log, so stay locked in for that one. I won't lie, but this is more of a hobby than a career right now. I only have a few scant hours out of my day to work on this project, and making devlogs like this takes me like half a week. But like I was saying before, I'm making great progress so far, and with solid coding fundamentals and OOP design patterns, I'm pretty confident that you, dear viewer, will soon be able to get your hands on this project. Well, eventually. Well, that's about it. Now, I'm not saying I'm the best programmer, but I do have a good grasp on OOP fundamentals and the solid programming principles. I'm learning new design patterns all the time to make my code more clean and extensible, and I think I'm clever enough to figure out, well, most of my problems. And honestly, it's not hard to get help when you need it. I really feel like we're in a great time for game development. There's tons of great game dev communities out there with lots of support just waiting for us. I'm truly fortunate to do what I do, and I hope to do it full time one day. Well, since the central mechanic in this game is the cards, and this is devlog quote unquote 0, things need to be established. Honestly, the further development continues, the less I can talk about new cards, because I don't want to spoil you. Still, I'll finish this devlog by saying that I'm starting with two cards in the game as of recording. The short sword weapon card and the fireball spell card. I'll go more into these during the first full devlog, but yeah, I'm really liking this start. Okay, well that's about it. If you like what you see, expect another devlog about every other month or so. As mentioned before, I don't have a lot of time for personal projects like this. My family has to eat. But I feel like I'll have a little bit more to show in a couple months or so. Since I don't plan to upload regularly, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell, do all the YouTube things so you know when I drop the next video. I try to reply to all my comments, so if you have any of those or any questions or anything, feel free to leave them down below. And thanks again for checking this out. I don't think that this looks too impressive right now, but anybody who's down to check it out at this early stage, I really appreciate the support. Until next time, see y'all later.